Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on cybersecurity strategies in Southeast Asia. My name is Nicholas Hamasevich. I'm a program manager at the East-West Center, and we're happy to have you all here with us, no matter what time of the day it is or night it is for you. We're happy you're here with us. We have a great event for you. At the East-West Center, we promote better relations and understanding between people and nations of the United States and the Indo-Pacific through exchanges, research, and dialogue. And for us, this is really important and really a really powerful thing that we do and able to bring people together in so many ways. One of the ways we do that at East West Center is with our RICE program, which is our Research, Innovation, Collaboration, and Exchange program, where we work with other scholars, organizations, researchers to do creative projects and research on important topics that are people are looking at or often sometimes not looking at so closely in the Indo-Pacific region. And so today is one of those partnerships and collaborations that we've done with Florence, Gamboa, and Fax Asia, and we are really excited about it. It's been a lot of great work for us and really brought attention to this important issue of cybersecurity strategies in Southeast Asia. Florence, she's a program manager at Fax Asia and a managing editor and coordinator for the Philippines Strategic Forum. She's also a research associate at Amador Research Services and a non-resident VASI fellow at the Pacific Forum. We've just enjoyed our time working with her. I want to turn it over to her so she can talk a little bit more about this series and what we have for you. Florence.
Thanks so much, Nicholas. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of the series on the state of cybersecurity in Southeast Asia. I've been tasked to give a short opening remark, and I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you what inspired me to propose this project or research with the East-West Center. As you know, with the surge of digital transformation in our daily lives, cybersecurity has become something that affects all of us personally. Most of us may have encountered or have been targeted by some sort of cyber threat, whether it's a scam or a phishing message, hacked account, or our personal data being misused. These are all tangible impacts that we feel because of digital vulnerability. Now, these vulnerabilities are multiplied or amplified when it comes to the state level, where governments face a mounting pressure to defend not only critical infrastructure, but also digital sovereignty against sophisticated cyber operations and the transnational nature of cybercrime. Southeast Asia is no exemption to this growing challenge. Despite the region's accelerating digital growth, cybersecurity remains unevenly institutionalized, under-resourced, and challenged by strategic divides. However, many Southeast Asian nations have now begun investing in national cybersecurity frameworks, strengthening ASEAN cooperation, and engaging with external partners. The series of articles we have published show that sustained capacity building, trust-based multilateralism, and regionally grounded norms will be key to advancing a more secure and resilient ASEAN cyberspace. And this is exactly why the East-West Center and Fax Asia launched the State of Cybersecurity in Southeast Asia project to uncover common challenges and explore avenues for cooperation with like-minded partners, especially the United States. This project brings together 10 experts from across the region to contribute toward building a more resilient and secure digital future for Southeast Asia. Today, we will be discussing Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia. Allow me also to take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to the East-West Center for its generous support in funding and facilitating this timely initiative. The East-West Center has long served as a vital platform for advancing mutual understanding and cooperation among the peoples of the United States, Asia, and the Pacific. This project would not have been possible without the EWC's enduring commitment to fostering regional connectivity and intellectual exchange. I also thank our contributors joining us today, Drs. Vic Tran, Katra Periandita, and Ricardo Corrado, for their intellectual generosity and patience throughout the editorial process. We hope that this webinar deepens the dialogue of cybersecurity in this region. It is also our hope that this initiative will catalyze further collaboration and knowledge sharing among Southeast Asian nations and their partners. By working together and building upon the expertise shared here today, we can forge a path towards a more secure and prosperous digital ecosystem in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much again for joining us today, and I'm really excited to have this discussion.
Thank you so much, Florence. Really appreciate that and appreciate all your work. Let me introduce our speakers for you, and we can get into these presentations and conversations that we have. First, we have Vic Tron, who is a senior fellow at Verve Research and an adjunct fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. She was part of the International Strategy Forum 2024 and will be a part of the Young Strategist Forum in 2025. Her research interests include grand strategy, maritime security, cybersecurity, and other issues kind of intersecting geopolitics and technology. We also have Ricardo Parado, who is the associate professor at the CamEd Business School and serves as the vice chairman of the Italian Business Chamber Cambodia, the Italian chapter with the Eurocham Cambodia. He is also a board advisor for the Federation of Cambodian Students Abroad and AI Farm. Additionally, he's been a consultant for the Telecommunication Regulatory of Cambodia. We also have Gatra Priyandita, who is a senior analyst in the Cyber Technology and Security Program at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. He is also currently a visiting fellow at the Australian National University's Department of Political and Social Change. He was formerly the non-resident WSD Honda Fellow at the Pacific Forum. And for our discussion, we have Alina Noor, who is a senior fellow in the Asia program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, where she focuses on Southeast Asia, particularly the impacts of technology and reshaping power dynamics, governance, and nation building in the region. Previously, she was director of the Political and Security Affairs and deputy director of Washington, D.C. office for the Asia Society Policy Institute. And prior to that, she was the associate professor at the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies in Honolulu. And between 2017 and 2019, she was part of the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace. So we have a great panel here for you to talk about these issues. I want to turn it over to Dr. Vic Tran to get us started.
Many thanks, Nicholas, Florence, and Zoe for making this happen. I'm glad to be here. So, when I wrote the paper, I thought that it's very important to differentiate between individual internet user and business and organization because they have different characteristics. So that's why they became target of different, cyber crimes. And within it, I also try to differentiate between cyber crimes and the nature of the threats. So, in terms of internet, individual internet user, so in Vietnam, the most prevalent cyber crimes targeting Vietnamese user is online fraud. And according to a survey in 2024, there are several types of online fraud that's the most used by criminals. First one is the fake investment schemes. The second is institutional identity personalization. For example, like pretend to be police or other authorities. And the third form is lottery announcement. And I hope that you have the chance to read the paper, but during this webinar, I would like to highlight the challenge of data collection that I didn't have chance to elaborate or explain in my paper. So in 2003, Vietnamese media reported, all reported the same number from the Vietnam Information Security Warning Portal, saying that in that year, the portal received about 16,000 reports of online frauds, with the estimate loss of around 16.6 billion US dollars. So that roughly about 3.6% of Vietnam's GDP. So that's a lot. And then, And then when I tried to find the equivalent figure for 2024, I realized that Vietnamese media reported, they all reported the number from a survey from the National Cybersecurity Association. So that survey attracted about 59,000 respondents. And then they come up with, a number of, on average, for every 220 smartphone users, there is one victim of online fraud. And then they come up with, an estimated loss of for 2024 around $733 million. So imagine from 16.6 billion to 733 million. It seemed like the amount of online fraud in Vietnam reduced so significantly. But that's just to highlight the challenge of data collection because they don't have the equivalent number to report. So that's why in my paper I used the number in 2023, even though it's like not as the most updated number as possible. And then in terms of the threats, so online fraud is a cybercrime, but online threats facing Vietnamese internet users that lead to online fraud is phishing attempts, and this is so prevalent because of the situation in Vietnam is that thousands of gigabytes of personal data has been illegally collected and traded online. So there's some reporting about that, but it's really difficult for law enforcement to do something about that because of they cannot identify the source. And then another report identify more than 125,000 fraudulent website addresses. And I know story of people who for example they want to buy a bag online and then didn't notice the web address and it turned out to be a fake one, so they lost money. It's very common. And the number that I cited earlier, 16,000 reports in 2023. So that only the number of people who knew about the portal and who made the effort to report. So imagine the actual cases. I imagine would be a lot higher than that. And then with the artificial intelligence technologies, phishing scam become more sophisticated with higher quality and speed. And in Vietnam, the Vietnamese Ministry of Public Security, or the police, actually already issued warning about deepfake scams as early as April 2023. And so that's in terms of individual internet user. And for the agency and business, they face different challenges, because they have a lot of, they have bigger, organization, so, and, more resources. So they have been targeted of ransomware attacks and spyware and also distributed denial of service attacks. But so there are, if you read in the paper, there's, in the last 2 years or so, there's instances of, ransomware attacks targeting big corporations in Vietnam, both state-owned and private sectors. So with that, also, and then so in terms of threat, I say, one thing that I didn't have chance to talk in my paper is that the most recent global cybersecurity index say that Vietnam, is now in the top tier, the role modeling tier of the index. But of course, Vietnam has done a lot of efforts and in many aspects. That's why it has such a high ranking. But the security vulnerability across servers, workstation, and information system is still prevalent in the country. So quickly about government effort, Vietnam has try to work with, the private sector, especially the foreign companies, for example, Google or Microsoft, to work with them for initiatives such as verifying official government phone numbers or the official government apps, on their phone store. And also Vietnam tried to also work closely with its partners, including India, the United States, Japan, and Singapore, and other countries to enhance its cyber capabilities. However, a lot of challenges still remain because despite Vietnam efforts, it still face shortage of cybersecurity professional, and even those Vietnam very conscious of being relying on any single partner, but the reality is that Vietnam internet provider still heavily using router from China, and about 36% of Vietnam's civilian cameras also imported on China. And the concern is that a lot of them are susceptible for exploitation and cyber attacks. So I will stop here and looking forward to the question. Thanks.
Thank you, Vic. Ricardo, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So let me share my screen if I can. I have actually slides. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Actually, it's a very interesting topic, mostly because cybersecurity is not about just the technical aspect or the policy making aspect or the business aspect. It's actually a very broad concept, and it's definitely in 10 minutes I will not be able to give you an understanding of what's going on in Cambodia. But at least I will give you maybe just a general overview that it can sparkle later to questions or maybe more tailored discussion. So in terms of Cambodia, Cambodia have been moving very fast in terms of digitalization in the last years. This is part of a overarching program from the government of really there is this concept of leapfrogging, moving so fast, similar to what Singapore did in the past, to try to achieve this goal, which is a very big goal, to become a developed country by 2050. And of course, digitalization, it's a digital transformation more than digitalization. It's a digital transformation. It's what Cambodia has targeted. They realize that is important. But the problem is how to achieve that. Focusing just on the cybersecurity aspect, we need to understand that Cambodia comes from a period that with the Khmer Rouge of civil war that destroyed completely the country, and destroyed completely the country, not just economically and structurally, but also in terms of policy making. So in terms of policy, in terms of regulation, there was not many regulations back then. And they started to develop regulation, talking about the digital sphere, telecommunication sphere, of course, after the 2000. And only recently, we are talking about the past probably 5 years, things have moved very fast from the regulatory aspect. In the slides here, for example, you can see some of the most important, let's say, framework or policies that Cambodia has introduced. And I specifically choose these three: the digital government policy, the digital economy and society framework, and the pentagonal strategy. The pentagonal strategy is probably the most let's say general one, because it really target almost all the development, all the sectors of Cambodia in a general way, based on 5 pillars. And of course, one of the pillars is heavily digitalization and digital aspect affect almost every single pillar, but definitely one of the pillars is about digital government and digital society, and digital economy is definitely one important aspect relevant to the digital transformation of Cambodia. But in terms of being more narrow on the policy aspect, the one that you see in these slides is what has been going on in the past years. We are talking about 2 to 5 years back. And why this has been happening in Cambodia? Because there was no regulatory body, really. It was a basic one. For example, just to give you an understanding, the telecom sector, the telecommunication sector, which affect everything from 5G, from which kind of hardware you need to use, how you allocate frequencies, satellite communication, everything. The last and still active law is from 2015, which, someone could say, oh, 2015, only 10 years. But in reality, for the digital sector, you can see it's a very old one. This is why in very recently, they have started to work on creating a new telecom law, which will be kind of an umbrella law. And under this umbrella, there will be different, let's say, decree or sub-decrees. So they give also some flexibility and some ability to be extended, so to become bigger and to add more groups, more section as we evolve. So the idea is very interesting, and I think it's very applicable. One of the aspects, without going to the detail for the sake of time, it's about cybersecurity. So in Cambodia, they target cybersecurity from 2 main sides. There is one side that is the cybersecurity aspect, and it's managed under the Ministry of Post and Telecommunication, which revolve more about the digital aspect of cybersecurity, the technical aspect of cybersecurity. For example, just to give you an idea, if you handle specific data, what is the privacy aspect of it? Where can you store? What kind of algorithm for encryption you needed to use for communicate can be stored in data center within the borders or outside the borders, and so on. What kind are the capacity and the certification that you as a company, as expert, should have to comply with the law? So this is one aspect. The other aspect instead is cybercrime. And cybercrime is another law that is coming out. It should come soon. And that is managed by the Ministry of Interior. And that describe all the regulation regarding on how you define a crime in the cyberspace, and what happens, what are the penalties if you are caught, and also what you have to do if you are a victim. So if you are a victim, for example, you are a company and you're a victim, you realize that you are a victim of an attack or there has been a breach, what you have to do? Do you have to report? You don't have to report? What is the steps you need to follow? And how much also, to which degree, to which extent you need to collaborate with authorities, and to which extent the authority has power to ask you and to force you to share specific information and specific data. So these are the two directions: the more technical and digital direction, and the more law and cybercrime direction. So Cambodia, in terms of where it stands, well, honestly, we are behind. So I always try to be positive, but we are definitely behind. Here you can see just some numbers in terms of ranks of development index, national cybersecurity index, global security, or made a mistake, but it's okay, global security index, and network readiness index. So whatever you wanted to look at, we are behind. Of course, we are moving fast, but we are moving from a situation where we are behind. And what means we are behind? It means that we don't have so much regulation, and we are trying to fix this. And we don't have so much expert. And when I say expert, it means experts that are certified with the most relevant and well-known certification in cybersecurity for professionals. Very, very little. Just a couple of months ago, I remember someone told me in Cambodia there are probably only less than 10 people that are certified with the highest standards for cybersecurity. So this is where we stand. And it's a problem because you know very well that from the government perspective, government cannot pay tons of money. So usually those few people that are very expert, they will be drawn more from the private sector. And the private sector itself cannot find people. And then there is also the problem of the educational sector. So university want and are also supported by the government to provide more degrees and more education in this sector, but they don't have experts, and hiring people from abroad costs money, and the economy of Cambodia is not to the point where they can offer the same salaries of, for example, Singapore. In Cambodia, mentioning also following up with what's happening in Vietnam, I think the situation of Cambodia is similar to Vietnam. So you have attacks both on the companies, both on the government, and both on individual. And if you go outside maybe of this group of people that are more expert, there are a lot of people out there, the normal Cambodian, normal citizens that really don't know much about cybersecurity, and they are very, very vulnerable. There are many aspects to discuss about it, but yes, this is very, very scary, mostly if you want to create a digital government where people have access through an app to everything, but also that expose them to a lot of risk. Another aspect being from the educational sector, definitely there is a gap of talent and a gap also of educators. So there is not enough educators capable to deliver really the training needed for grooming the the new generation of digital talent in Cambodia. In terms of domestic initiative, there have been a lot done. There are the government is subsidizing a lot of training in education, in higher education. They are pushing, supporting, for example, with the financial support, government. Not only government agency, but also private sector that wanted to develop their skills. They are introducing, of course, a regulatory body, and they are trying to partner with a lot of companies and also of governments. You can see here some example through different systems, through individual partnership, so bilateral partnership with the government, and also through being part of overarching program that involve multiple people. We have the Japan, we have the Australia, we have the Korean also that it was not mentioned here, the Australian, the Indians. Definitely the China is playing a major role. Not only are the major investors, but there is a lot of connection. They are offering programs mostly with Huawei. You see also I have a cup here from Huawei. They have entered Cambodia already more than 20 years ago. They have done a lot, collaborated with the government, collaborating with the private sector, building digital infrastructure, selling hardware. So it's really heavily present here in Cambodia. And in terms of way forward, well, I mentioned already to you, you have the educational aspect that needs to be built, the digital government, regulations. It's a really very complicated matter, but we can say that Cambodia is building fast, but there is still a lot to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. Dr. Gatra Priyandita, please.
All right. Great. Well, thanks so much, Nicholas, for the introduction, and good afternoon from Canberra, everyone. Let me just at the outset thank FACS Asia as well as the East-West Center for the invitation to not only participate in this webinar, but also more broadly on the project. So today I'll be talking about my paper, which looks at cybersecurity resilience in Indonesia. And I think for the most part, Indonesia, just like Cambodia, just like Vietnam, many other countries around the world, its government, its industries are looking to the magical powers of digital technology as a means of both bolstering economic growth as well as addressing a lot of social economic ills, improving public services, and so on. Past 15 years or so, we have seen this digital boom in Indonesia where you saw a lot of people, for example, establishing tech startups, up to 10 unicorns, if I'm not mistaken. Government and industry have also worked together to sort of extend digital transformation and internet connectivity. I think right now, nearly 80% of Indonesians have access to the internet. The internet economy itself is generating about $130 billion this year, based on an estimate by Google and Temasek and Bain. So there's a lot of excitement about the internet. A lot of public services are now also going online, which is important in a country where corruption is still seen as a serious issue. Now, despite all this excitement, there are also still a lot of challenges associated with the internet. And this is something that the Indonesian government deeply, deeply recognizes. In 2023, Indonesia's Cybersecurity Agency estimated that cybercrime losses were at nearly around $1 billion. And that's just based on things that have been reported online, as well as a few other estimates. So the reality is probably a lot more serious than that. We're seeing a lot more attacks at critical infrastructure, including, say, the National Data Center last year, that led to data breaches, and as well as a lot of ransomware attacks targeting banks, hospitals, and so on. So the financial costs have been quite large for Indonesian society. We also see a lot of cyber-enabled crimes like online gambling, as well as online loan apps that are creating a lot of social issues, where people, particularly since COVID, have fallen victim to online gambling, or suddenly find themselves as owing a lot of people, getting money online, loans online, and owing a lot of money online. So both of these issues have become national priorities for the current government of President Prabowo Subianto. So a lot of opportunities seen with the internet, but also a lot of challenges, social, economic, of course, security challenges that have also popped up. I haven't even spoken about, for example, state-sponsored cyber operations. Now, given all these challenges, the government has been investing a lot. The government has been looking to bolster Indonesia's institutional and legal capacity to defend its cyberspace, and especially in the past 10 years or so. In 2017, for example, Indonesia set up the National Cyber and Crypto Agency, which as an agency provided the standards really for cybersecurity across government agencies. They've also reached out to, say, critical infrastructure operators to set certain standards. And the National Cyber Agency has also established computer security and response teams to help monitor and quickly respond to cyber-enabled threats. So by 2020, as of last year, I think the Cybersecurity Agency has established around 121 government CSIRTs across government agencies. The legal ecosystem has also been empowered. I think for the most part, cybersecurity still depends on a law going back to 2008 on information and on electronic information transactions, but this has been updated in 2016. And now we also have laws looking at, for example, security and critical information infrastructure, as well as a data protection bill that was introduced in 2022 that should come into effect as of this year or last year. Cyber diplomacy has also emerged as a key priority. So Indonesia is looking to establish its capacity building efforts with key partners, including the United States, including China, Australia, Japan, and so on. Broadly, however, there are key structural challenges. Under-resourcing is a persistent issue. The amount of funding provided, for example, cybersecurity agencies remain very low. At the moment, the Cybersecurity Agency, for example, has seen its funding go down from around 2 trillion rupiah to around 783 billion rupiah, which is roughly around, I think, 50 to 60 million US. This was part of a much broader effort at government efficiency cuts. This has effects, obviously, when it comes to, say, improving human capital, buying infrastructure for cybersecurity, as well as more broadly on trying to focus on empowering critical information infrastructures by providing information as well as other kinds of equipment. There's also problems associated with regulatory institutional fragmentation. So Indonesia lacks a unified legal and strategic framework on cybersecurity. A lot of the laws are overlapping. There is no distinct cybersecurity law. The Cybersecurity Agency, for example, lacks the legal power to sort of enforce cybersecurity standards across governments and industry. There is movement towards creating a cybersecurity resilience bill that has been going on since 2019, but there's been a lot of challenges in its implementation. But some positive news is that maybe this year will come to effect. All of this leads to problems associated with gaps in incident reporting, response mandates, overlaps in, say, censorship and enforcement powers, weak industry guidance on minimum cybersecurity standards, and delayed or inconsistent coordination amongst during major breaches. So in short, there's a lot of rules, but no serious playbook to sort of guide that through. No cybersecurity strategy as well to sort of guide the president's or the government's vision of what cybersecurity means. Moving forward, again, there is growing public awareness about the challenges associated with data breaches, about the importance of privacy and data security. There's also a lot of interest now in critical information infrastructure security, a lot more interest in cyber diplomacy, including when it comes to capacity building, but for the most part, still a lot of challenges. I might just end it there, and I might pass it on to Nicholas.
Thank you so much. That was really great. 3 great presentations, 3 great papers. I'd like to turn over to Alina Noor to for her remarks and her reflections on these papers and presentations and this important issue of cybersecurity in Southeast Asia. Alina, please.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, EWC, as well as Fax Asia, for having me on here today. I have the privilege of commenting on these papers, which were very well written. I learned a lot from them, and the luxury of writing no paper. And so I'm in a particularly good spot, I think. But I want to thank my friends, Vic, Gatra, Ricardo. We have not had the pleasure of meeting. I have not had the pleasure of meeting you, but I really learned a lot from all 3 country papers, particularly the details of cybersecurity development, as well as the gaps in that development in Vietnam, Indonesia, and Cambodia. I noticed a common theme of this enthusiasm and interest in everything digital, which is common across all of Southeast Asia, but also saw lack and awareness of that lack of the need for digital upskilling, particularly on the most basic of skills, which is really an awareness of cyber hygiene, as we call it, just knowing what not to click on and what not to plug into your system. I've been involved in these discussions for a number of years. I don't particularly care to say how many because it'll reveal my age. But, I think a lot of that fundamental problem of not having sufficient digital literacy across the masses is still a pervasive problem in and around Southeast Asia. And of course, there have been a number of initiatives that have gone to plug in that gap from within ASEAN, particularly led by Singapore's ASEAN-Singapore Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, but also from other ASEAN dialogue partners, including Japan, the United States, and China, as has been noted. I'm conscious of time. I just want to table 3 short points, drawing on my reflections from the 3 papers. One, I really like the categorization that Big offered of distinguishing between individual, corporate, as well as state usage of cyber tools and the different risks that each of those uses entails. And I think it's really important for capacity building implications because obviously these different sets of users, if you will, bring around different skills that need to be uploaded and to be upgraded. So for example, I think, as was pointed out by all 3 panelists, online fraud, scams, cyber scams seem to be prevalent amongst the largest group of users, individuals, the public. And here I think, a number of these educational awareness programs as well as initiatives have tried to better educate the public about how to use the internet on a very basic level. But I think a lot of these capacity building programs can also be improved by contextualizing them even further and taking into account some of the trends that are unique to each of these countries and providing them in a language that is not only applicable, but also easily understandable to the specific context of each of these countries. And I would have loved to hear more about some of those programs in the 3 countries. I think on the business front and corporate usage of cyber tools and the internet in general, there has been some discussion around mandatory reporting, which no business really wants to do because there's an element of vulnerability that's disclosed when there is a mandatory reporting obligation, but also the role of insurance and what that plays in terms of the liability that companies face when they're breached, when their cybersecurity is breached. And there's been little discussion in Southeast Asian context about this, and I would love to hear more about this, perhaps in future discussions. And then finally, at the state level, there's been capacity building, of course, on the policy and legal fronts. And at the UN, there have been many years of discussions on cyber norms. GATRA is well plugged into this conversation. And we may or may not be approaching some sort of consensus depending on Singapore's leadership of the open-ended working group on these norms and international law discussions. So we'll see how that pans out in the next few years. Second point is on the harmonization of these practices and laws. You know, I note that Vietnam has been championing its burgeoning role in regional affairs. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the recently adopted UN Convention on Cybercrime is due to be signed in Hanoi in the coming weeks or maybe a month from now. It's supposed to be mid-2025. And so this says a lot about how far the Convention on Cybercrime has come from its Budapest origins, when some of those details about the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime were disputed. I think only the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe one other Southeast Asian country actually signed on to that. But now that it's been almost universally accepted at the UN General Assembly level, and Vietnam is going to host the signing of this important convention, it says a lot about how serious Vietnam and the region is taking the issue of cybercrime and international laws on it. Finally, my third and last point is just a reminder, I think, to us all that cybersecurity risks, particularly at the state level, exist from all parties. There's a tendency for us to focus on only certain actors, and that is, you know, partly because of our bias in reading English language news and from certain sources. But I think there have been other reports dating back at least a decade to exploitation by other powerful state actors apart from China, and this includes the United States, about the exploitation of routers, of servers, of other computer network devices across the whole chain of some of these computer network devices. And so I think for us in Southeast Asia, it's really important to keep in mind that these risks and threats come from all different directions, including from within the region. So I'll just pause there and look forward to more of a conversation.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Just gonna have a couple questions from us, and then if you in the audience have some questions, please put it in the Q&A, and we will convey those questions over to the panelists. And so if Alina or Florence, if you have any other questions as well, please ask those as well. But I think the exciting thing about these papers and the presentations today is helping us differentiate and remind us about these different levels of cyber development, and then the necessity for cybersecurity at that individual business level and the state level, and then just the growth, especially at the individual level. And so I think my kind of first question is really kind of building off what Alina was saying on cyber hygiene, especially on the individual level, where people are encouraged to be online, encouraged to do more work online, encouraged to interact online. How much do you see in your country, in the countries you looked at, people learning, or is there a way to quickly learn about cyber hygiene and how to properly interact online, or is it something that really needs to be trained and picked up both in schools and work? And at home, having your parents tell you how to do these things as well. I just, how do you just kind of assess that in the individual level, how people are learning about digital hygiene and trying to get better at that for their own kind of personal security? Maybe Bic, I don't know if you want to start us off.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So I remember having conversation with friends and colleagues about, digital literacy, right? So whether it should be mandatory in school or optional. So of course, each of the options have advantages and disadvantages. I think it's very important to have some level of basic knowledge in school. But we need to be very cautious about who choose and who's build the curriculum, right? Things like digital hygiene can be more objective, I guess, what to click on, what to not to click, how to double check, to see the fraudulent website and links. But digital literacy also has, include broader other things. For example, what source of news that you should trust. That's when the controversy comes in because, it's different, various, depending on different people opinions, right? So I think, digital hygiene, I think it could be the first component of the digital literacy in general that we can make, mandatory in school.
I may add to that. So firstly, I think there's a powerful story about the seatbelt and how it took, I think, 50 years before it became natural for people to start learning how to use a seatbelt automatically, right, as they get into the car. I don't think there'll be a time when digital awareness building is successful and that everyone has 100% has the 100% ability to know all, to be super cyber secure. I think even amongst the smartest of us will fall victim to cyber scams because they're becoming a lot more sophisticated themselves, right? I think, of course, at the school level, there are a lot of programs in Indonesia, I think, that target both school, vulnerable groups. So that's school-age students, but also more broadly, for example, the elderly folks, the elderly, as well as more broadly, people living in rural and regional areas where, access to the internet may be maybe a bit more new. They might have more access to social media, but they might not know, the difference between, say, what's a scam and what's legitimate. But it shouldn't just be awareness building there. I think there has to be a serious effort by both government and industry to also, firstly, support societies, communities by identifying what's a threat and what's not. It's become more common, I think, in Indonesia, for example, for numbers associated with scams. It'll say, "Oh, this is a scam number, so don't pick up." So industry has a proactive role to play in helping to identify potential threats, minimizing risk as well. And of course, government has to set the way, right? Government regulates and government provides guidance. Government must actually hold the bar higher, I think, for industry to make sure that their software is a lot more secure, mitigate as much risk as possible for potential cyber attacks, and all of this, I think, would make society a bit more secure. But awareness building as an effort, as an initiative, will go on forever.
Great. All three of you talked about Indonesia, Vietnam, and Cambodia reaching out to other countries and working with other countries. And Ricardo, in your paper, I thought you kind of mentioned a couple of those and what Cambodia was trying to do with the particular countries. Can you talk about Cambodia and China, and then Cambodia and some of the other with some of the other countries and what they're trying to do, and then maybe Bic and Gadra, kind of Vietnam and China, what they're doing cyber security wise or cooperation, and then maybe another country to kind of differentiate or compare with that.
So yes, this is an interesting question. Let me also just add the one thing on the question of before first. Yeah, I agree with what Priyandita mentioned. It's a continuous effort. There will never be a point where everyone will be ready. And we need also to add, definitely, coming from the educational sector, I would say add the training, because we need to start from when people are young. But then we need also to do a lot of awareness for people that are already not in school, and actually they are the more vulnerable. And we need always to see things from two perspectives. Number one, building system that defend the people. So it's, like, for example, basic thing as a double factor authentication, or system that are built by design to protect people. But then we also need to empower people with knowledge, because by probability, I saw like more than 90% or 94% of the attacks actually that are successful attacks happen because of social engineering. So you don't use weaknesses in the system. You use just to manipulate people to do something that they should not do, like clicking on a link. So we need to empower people. Coming instead to your question of what Cambodia specifically is doing, well, Cambodia, I had an interesting conversation yesterday, and someone told me this interesting aspect. They say Cambodia, look, at this moment is someone that is trying to get help from everyone. So actually, it's not just China. They reach out to Japan, they reach out to India, they reach out to Korea, they reach out to China, they reach out to US, they reach out to European Union, and usually each of these partners they try to get some help in some niche area. For example, there are a discussion ongoing with the Japanese government for the creation of a data center, national data center. At the same time, there is discussion also with Chinese counterpart. There is a discussion with the French that are historically strong presence here for the development of an AI center that can be used kind of research and development. There is a discussion ongoing with the European counterpart. So this is a very good approach actually to kind of be open to everyone. But on the other hand, this open also big risks. Why? Because it's hard to create a system that is very effective, both in terms of digital infrastructure and security, when you want to deal with hardware that is Chinese, for example, with regulation that follow the European Union, with implementation that is made by Japanese, and with software that comes from the United States. Not only it's very difficult, but it's really difficult to make it happen, because you know very well that, from the technical perspective and from the engineering point of view, you just connect the two dots and try to make two systems work together. But there is also, kind of interest behind, geopolitics behind, so it's not that easy. So this approach of Cambodia, I think eventually will have to end up into going more toward siding more with one side over the other one. And this is absolutely just my point of view. I could be perfectly wrong. Maybe in the next 2 years, someone will say, see, you say something wrong. But because the Chinese partner that are getting a lot of giving a lot of support with Cambodia, just look at the latest visit of President Xi Jinping here in Cambodia with the concept of iron claw friendship. I think that they enter more providing hardware, and from the engineering perspective, when you provide hardware, then that is what is hard to change. So once the digital infrastructure will be Chinese built, you can have software that is from other partners, but at the end of the day, it will be always hard to control it and to manage it properly. So eventually, you will have to side more toward one side, which is not bad or good. It's just what it is.
Should I?
Yes, please.
Okay, I
Greg.
can.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
can comment some things on Vietnam, China. So in general, Vietnam try to keep a positive relationship with China. So whenever there's meeting between a high-ranking official or their leaders, they always make commitment to collaborate. And for example, last year when Vietnamese Minister of Public Security met with his Chinese counterpart, they did mention cybersecurity in their joint statement. But it's just a very general statement, right? And I'm not aware of like concrete initiative, or it's not available in the public that I don't know. But just want to reflect a point that Elena said earlier about the exploitation from other countries rather than China. So well, with Vietnam, it's always tried to have a pragmatic approach, cooperate with every partners that it can. But the matter of trust is a different issue, right? Even with the United States, Vietnam, has joined different initiatives to enhance its cyber capabilities. But within the Vietnamese Communist Party of Vietnam, there is a lingering distrust that, there is some, with social media and internet user, there's some support from external forces, including the United States government, trying to undermine the communist regime in Vietnam. So similarly, even if there's some mistrust between Vietnam and China, especially in the South China Sea disputes, but if there is some opportunity that Vietnam can elevate the resources from China to enhance its cyber capability, it will take it.
Great, thank you. Gotcha. Did you have anything about Indonesia and China, or Indonesia and some other countries, what they're trying to do to cooperate on cyber issues?
Yeah, sure. Happy to sort of add in. So for context, Indonesia has a fairly, it's got a fairly complicated relationship with China. For the most part, there is a growing trajectory. There's deepening economic, diplomatic, security ties with China. On cyber, like with Cambodia and Vietnam, Indonesia is pretty open to engage with any country when it comes to both capacity building, discussion of cyber norms, information sharing. Where China is probably in the lead, and specifically where Huawei is in the lead, is when it comes to providing physical infrastructure, specific things like the telecommunication towers. Also, beyond that, it's been in the lead when it comes to providing support for Indonesia's internet connectivity rollout. Now, officials in Indonesia can be sort of divided into several camps when it comes to the question of whether Huawei poses any risks. There are those who believe that there are risks associated with Huawei that may be specific to Huawei. There are those who believe that all kinds of foreign equipments have general risks. I mean, it was through Ericsson equipment, for example, that we heard about the Snowden leaks, for the Australia spying on Indonesian officials. It was through Ericsson. And then there are those who argue that none of this really matters because this is just vendor talk, and we have to focus on what's in front of us, and that's needing to really expand internet connectivity to as many places as possible. So for the most part, Indonesia's approach to telecoms equipment is driven by developmental imperatives. For a country of Indonesia's shape, where there are many, many islands, it gets very expensive for you to be very choosy. And Huawei equipment tends to be a bit more cheaper than others. Outside of that, Huawei has done very well, I think, when it comes to the soft elements of engagement. They've provided a lot of capacity building support. They've provided a lot of resources to support students from vocational schools, all the way up to professionals at the industry level. This is the kind of engagement and access that you don't see enough with other companies. Having said that, of course, Indonesia also has a lot of engagement with Cisco, with Microsoft, with Apple. So Huawei is not the only actor in town, but it remains very influential because it provides cheaper equipment and it aligns with a lot of the goals that the Indonesian government has, which includes, again, human capital building.
Great. One of the questions we had from the audience was talking about what role or issues come about when you have a state-owned telecommunication company versus private sector, and how that might play into cybersecurity in the countries, or the competition or the growth in the countries. And so if any of the panelists had any comments on that question and that dynamic.
Yeah, I can go ahead. So I think that, like, for example, in Vietnam, even if the government prefer to have, the only state-owned, system for its own security, but it has, but it realized that it cannot do so. So 2 years ago, in 2023, Vietnam passed a new law on telecommunications that the first time opened the door for wholly foreign-owned investment in basic telecommunication services, including data centers and cloud computing.
I think you've got a good mix of the countries here represented to answer that question, because I think Vietnam naturally, I think, is a more the security imperative can play a role there as well, right, when it comes to equipment procurement. I mean, the whole 5G thing, for example, where Vietnam is interested in developing their own stuff. But Indonesia, again, I mean, for the most part, the telcos, there's three main telcos, one of which is a state-owned enterprise, or at least the government has a huge stake in it. For the most part, it's still the development imperative. And I think part of the reason behind this is because cybersecurity is still not seen as a top priority for the government. Even when folks think about threats emanating from the internet, it's still things like cyber scams and online gambling. So these are content level issues rather than, say, logical or physical layer issues, right? So the development imperative still reigns supreme, even when the state has a huge stake in tech operators in Indonesia.
So from the perspective of Cambodia, I think we need to understand that this country don't have the abilities to produce. They don't have an industry for producing software or hardware. So, I mean, you can create a company. You could say, okay, let's make everything public and create a telco provider that is public. By the way, Cambodia has one, which is Telecom Cambodia, but it's not the only one. Of course, there are also private, but at the end of the day, even them, they would have to buy things from outside. So it's just a matter of, realistically, it's a matter, do you go with the West or do you go with China? So, or maybe with Korea, let's say, or Japan. But at the end of the day, in the telecom sector now, it's harder even for Cambodia to choose and for the West to compete, for a simple reason that China is very aggressive. China knows how to enter the market, know how to speak to Asians. Asians are very pragmatic. I can tell you many examples. So, for example, they know how to speak with the Cambodians, whether the European Union, for example, they have a very more ethical approach that is make them fall behind in the competition always. And additionally, Chinese compete very good on the price. So they come with a lot of offer, a lot of price, and not many requirements. So it's, for a country like Cambodia, if you ask to Cambodia, why you go with the one and don't go with the other one, they will say because we need, and this is the best offer.
That's interesting. Do any of the panelists know if, kind of with the infrastructure around the undersea cables and South China Sea issues and concerns with China messing and damaging the undersea cables and that sort of connectivity and those sort of issues, how that countries are looking at that? I mean, some of you mentioned that sometimes on the state security side, when you have trouble with the South China Sea or trouble with China and the South China Sea dynamics, that's when you see more of an uptick on that cyber attacks there as well. So I was wondering if any of the panelists had any thoughts on that.
Yes, I can go first. So basically, so Vietnam's, I think there's increasingly concern about subsea cable because for the last few years, Vietnam has suffered from frequent damage of the subsea cables that lead to the loss of internet or slowdown of internet services. It happens so frequently that and the attribution often go to sharks and other incident at sea. But with escalation in the South China Sea disputes and the general skepticism of the Vietnamese population toward China, it's understandable that many people would kind of suspect that there is more than accidental cause behind that. And I remember probably 2 or 3 months ago, China announced that now it had developed a deep mining device that able to cut the subsea cable at a very depth. So that raised concern around the region as well. And even though Vietnam has not explicitly, articulate its plan to deal, to enhance its protection for subsea cables, but in general, there are two things that Vietnam has done. The first one is to enhance maritime domain awareness. So by better understanding the situation at sea and underwater, Vietnam can try to incorporate that awareness into protect its subsea cable. And then the second one is that in the 2022 cybersecurity strategy, Vietnam stated that it will try to have more subsea cables. So, to increase the redundancies, and then for that also increase the resilience. So at the moment, Vietnam has 5 operational subsea cables, and I think there are 3 more coming up in the next 2 years.
I can chip in a bit on this. I think there are at least two layers to this discussion on subsea cables. One is kind of the vulnerabilities around what's going on in the South China Sea and the intersection of kind of the espionage vulnerabilities related to the South China Sea dispute. So there's a geopolitical layer added on to the critical infrastructure layer. And really the espionage risk is at the landing points, not so much with the cables themselves, although it's entirely possible. But the other discussion that we've seen mainly in mainstream media around Chinese cable cutting capabilities, I think if we talk to the technical experts, it's all been a bit overblown. So this new tech that supposedly the Chinese have with cable cutting is really quite standard. It's called a grapnel, and it exists on actually quite a lot of ships. And so there's a tendency for exaggeration because of the geopolitical sensationalism around all that's going on, particularly in the South China Sea and particularly as it concerns China. And so I would just urge caution about what we're reading in the press, because if you talk to the people who actually know the technical details of these developments, a lot of it is just overblown. A lot of the damage, most of the damage done to cables around the world has been because of just the age of cables due to accidental cutting, anchor dragging, and it's just like very mundane stuff like that. And so the geopolitical overlay is really, I think, quite recent, and it's been fueled by a lot of other motivations, particularly in the media.
Great, thank you for all those. Another question we have is about ASEAN itself as an organization, and what is ASEAN's understanding of cybersecurity, and how does that sort of play into how the countries individually are trying to address cybersecurity issues? So does anyone want to talk about how ASEAN itself as an organization is looking at cybersecurity and how to try to create any norms or processes for the region on cybersecurity?
I might just kick off. So, I mean, ASEAN has been working together on cybersecurity for quite a while now, I think. This year, the Malaysian chairmanship will be kicking off, I think, the 3rd cybersecurity cooperation strategy. So that's cooperation on multiple sets of layers, including, say, information sharing, capacity buildings, discussion on norms, and so on. Countries have different regulations and laws when it comes to cybersecurity because in my view, I mean, a lot of the regulations and laws are very much reactive to incidents and issues. Yes, there may be some divisions when it comes to what constitutes as a cyber attack. I mean, I think, for example, a distinct feature of the conversation between, say, the West and, say, China and Russia is this layer of information, right? I mean, cybersecurity is mainly focused on computer intrusions in the West. And it doesn't really concern, for example, information-based threats. That's completely something different. I think in Southeast Asia, there's probably a bit more convergence on that aspect. Now, just on, you were talking about norms. Singapore and Malaysia last year, I think, spearheaded this effort to make sense of what they call as the UN 11 norms of responsible state behavior in cyberspace. So that's a series of things that thou shall and shall not do in cyberspace during peacetime as a state. The UN agreement that came with it back in 2015 remains relatively conceptual, in that it's things like, you should not be damaging another country's critical infrastructure during peacetime. But how do you operationalize that, right? So ASEAN has been working towards operationalizing, of making a checklist to support states in operationalizing the 11 norms. I think cooperation over cybersecurity will continue on based on that checklist. Right now, we have a better sense of what it means for states to cooperate at the international level, what it means for states to make sure that their countries do not become victim to do not become host to cyber crimes. And I think while there's already a lot of technical collaboration at the CERT level, and there's a lot of collaboration at the policy level, there's now possibly going to be more movement towards engaging more actors within ASEAN. So this includes, for example, the Attorney General's offices. We have the police agencies, for example. So I think the conversation is becoming a lot more inclusive.
Great. That's so interesting on these things. We're running up on time, so I just want to again thank our panelists for their conversation, their insight on these issues. Thank Florence for all her work and coordination on what she's done with this great topic. I really encourage you to read these papers, and I'd encourage you again to join us next week and the subsequent weeks as we keep going through this series on cybersecurity in Southeast Asia and really help us talk through all these issues and great things. So again, I want to thank everybody for staying up late, if you're staying up late with us, or for getting up early if you got up with us. So we really, really appreciate it and hope everyone continues to work on all these great issues. And we love working on these issues and love working with all of you on these issues. Thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Bye, everyone. Thank you.